Welcome to Existence's Deep Dive. This is where we try to unearth the invisible, maybe unpack the comfortable, and really challenge how we think about power, knowledge, and change and development. Today, we're diving into something we're calling the social map is not the territory, reclaiming local knowledge systems. Because, behind every single development plan, every forest boundary line, or even just a village profile, there's always a story. And, well, let's be honest, often it's a story someone else wrote about a community, kind of without them really being in the picture. So yeah, buckle up. Today we're not just reading maps, we're sort of tearing them open. Let me just ask you, our listener, a quick question. When was the last time you walked into a community, maybe with a baseline survey, a resource map, that kind of stakeholder grid, and you just assumed, yeah, that gives me the full picture? Because here's the thing. Maps, they simplify reality. That's basically their job, right? But way too often, that simplification just completely erases the wisdom, the nuance, the whole worldview of the very people we say we're working with. In Seeing Like a State, James C. Scott says something really brilliant. He says, in order to make a society governable, states must first make it legible. Just think about that word. Legibility. It means basically tidying up all the messy realities so policies and programs can actually work or seem to work. But when we do that, what are we cutting out? What gets lost? The way a tribal elder reads soil just by the smell, or how a community marks out its sacred forest zones, maybe the oral memory of a spring that, disappears every seventh summer. You're just not going to find those things in standard GIS layers. But they are absolutely part of the living map, the real map. So let's maybe shift focus slightly. Back to 1995, Arun Agrawal wrote this really landmark paper, you might know it, Dismantling the Divide Between Indigenous and Scientific Knowledge.
Oh yeah, Agrawal's work. Really fundamental.
Absolutely. And he challenged this dangerous myth, really, the idea that knowledge coming out of the West is somehow universal, objective.
Right. While indigenous knowledge is seen as just local, anecdotal, maybe quaint.
Exactly. And does that sound familiar? I mean, we've all seen this play out, haven't we? In agriculture, forestry, health, even education.
Definitely. The farmer's gut feeling about planting times, that's dismissed as unscientific.
Right. But a drone image, oh, that's data.
Mm-hmm. Or a grandmother's forest calendar passed down generations, that's just folklore.
But satellite rainfall data.
Oh, no, that's reliable.
It's a clear hierarchy of knowledge.
It is. And Agrawal really urges us to see all knowledge as, well, socially constructed. It's contextual, it's fluid, it's embedded in culture and history.
So the scientific knowledge we often prioritize is just as embedded in its own culture and context as any other form.
Exactly. So if we only validate what we can digitize or quantify or get peer-reviewed, we're probably not really listening, are we? No, it feels more like extraction. Taking what fits our box.
Yeah, extracting. That's a good word for it. So let me tell you a story that illustrates this. From Kalimantan in Indonesia.
Okay.
So back in the 1990s, you had these forest communities, right? And they were literally being displaced by official state forestry maps and big commercial concessions moving in.
Right. Their traditional lands just vanishing from the official record.
Precisely. So what did they do? This is the fascinating part.
They fought back, presumably.
They did, but how they did it. They created their own maps.
Ah, interesting. Not GIS maps, I guess.
No, hand-drawn maps.
Yeah.
Grounded in their collective memory, their rituals, their stories about the land. It was knowledge made visible.
Wow. That's powerful.
It really is. And this practice, it was later coined countermapping by an anthropologist named Nancy Peluso.
Countermapping, I like that. It implies a challenge.
Exactly. Because these weren't just protest tools, you see. They were declarations of their truth. They fundamentally showed that maps aren't neutral objects.
No, they're political artifacts. They represent someone's view, someone's power.
Absolutely. And Peluso had this quite chilling quote in her work. She said, "Maps have been weapons of war. They can also be tools of resistance."
That really hits home, turning the tool of the powerful back against them.
Right. And today, this idea, countermapping, it's used all over. Indigenous communities in India, Brazil, Canada, even folks in urban slums fighting eviction.
Using maps to claim rights, to reassert their identity on their own terms.
Exactly. It's a really vital tool. Now, thinking about tools, many of us, we use PRA, Participatory Rural Appraisal.
Yeah, PRA, social maps, Venn diagrams, timelines, standard toolkit for many.
Right. And we often sit with communities, we facilitate these exercises, make these maps, And often we feel pretty good about it, like we've done participation.
That feeling of we involved them.
Yeah. But Robert Chambers himself, often called the godfather of PRA, he actually warned us. He said, even participatory tools can disempower when facilitators hold hidden power.
That's a crucial warning. The tool itself isn't magic. It depends entirely on how it's used and by whom.
Exactly. So it forces us to ask some tough questions, doesn't it? Like in those mapping sessions. Who's really holding the marker?
Right. Whose voice dominates? Who gets to draw the lines, literally and figuratively?
And who speaks? And maybe more importantly, who quietly watches? Maybe holds crucial knowledge, but is never really asked, or maybe feels they can't speak up.
Yeah, the power dynamics in the room are key.
They are. And sometimes, let's be honest, what we call community mapping or participatory planning. It can just be performative participation.
Ticking the participation box.
Pretty much. It gives this illusion, this sort of feeling of co-creation. But actually, the big decisions, they were probably already made somewhere else.
So the map becomes a way to legitimize a decision rather than inform it.
Exactly. We absolutely cannot confuse using the tools with achieving real transformation. They're not the same thing.
No, definitely not.
So maybe let's just pause here for a second. I want you, our listener, just to reflect on a few questions. Maybe, jot them down, or perhaps bring them up in your next team meeting or discussion. Just things to mull over. First, whose knowledge do I really prioritize when I'm designing programs or projects? And why? Like, honestly, why?
That's a core question. What counts as valid knowledge?
And following that, do I genuinely validate indigenous knowledge or experiential knowledge as truly equal to, say, written academic knowledge or quantitative data? Or is there still that implicit hierarchy?
Do we need it proven in our terms?
Right. And when using participatory tools like mapping or ranking, am I consciously creating genuine space for local wisdom to emerge? Or am I maybe just filling that space with my own assumptions, my own categories?
It's easy to lead the witness, even unintentionally.
It is. And have I ever actually seen a community's own map, whether literal or metaphorical, really resist or challenge a top-down plan? And if I did, what happened next? What did I do?
That's where the rubber hits the road, isn't it? How do we respond when local knowledge conflicts with the plan?
Exactly. And maybe a final thought. How might we, as organizations or funders, actively support and maybe even publish counter-knowledge, that rich, lived wisdom, not just collect more counter-data that fits our existing frameworks?
Shifting the focus from data points to actual understanding and narratives.
Precisely. Because this isn't just about maps, is it? At the end of the day, it's about mindset.
Fundamentally.
Reclaiming local knowledge, it's not about romanticizing tradition or rejecting science out of hand.
No, it's more nuanced than that.
It's about, well, decolonizing our own frameworks, isn't it? Being aware of the power dynamics embedded in how we think and work.
And consciously stepping back sometimes.
Yes, letting communities speak in their own terms, using their own languages, their own metaphors to describe their realities.
Moving from mapping for people
to mapping with people. Or maybe even just stepping aside sometimes and letting them lead entirely.
Trusting their process, their knowledge.
Yeah. And it's really about recognizing, I think, that real social intelligence, true effectiveness in this work.
Yeah.
It's not actually about being the cleverest person in the room or having the fanciest tools.
No, it's much more about humility.
Exactly. It's about being humble enough to listen, to learn, and to genuinely try and understand the complexity of the world as other people experience it.
This has been Existence's Deep Dive, where we try to unmap what's been mapped and maybe relearn some things we thought we knew. As you log off today, maybe just ask yourself, where have I drawn the lines, perhaps unconsciously? And whose truths, whose knowledge, whose realities have I maybe left outside those boundaries? This isn't the end of the conversation, of course. It's really just the edge of the map. Until next time, stay curious and stay grounded.